it's important to understand that we're not focusing on a new product and disregarding the old product as well. Like right now, even as we're having this conversation, right, you also kind of teased out in your email this past week about us making some tweaks to Meal 1 to make it more enhanced. I think we've talked about that on the podcast already, of us taking trips out to the manufacturer to get that locked in. Like that stuff's going to be rolling out soon, and it's going to make Meal 1 better.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow was cracking.
What up, y'all? It is that time of the month again. This is what we call Creatures of Habit, what's really happening. Jonathan Yarmeisch, my partner in crime, my yin to the yang, my co-pilot, my guardrail, the guy who is bringing all the brains to Creatures of Habit, sitting on my left side here. And this is when we grab your ear for about 20 to 30 minutes and talk to you about what's happening at Creatures of Habit, so we can bring you guys along the journey with us as we build this brand. And I've been getting so much great feedback about these episodes. People love it, and I love doing it. I think it's a really fun thing to do, to really open up the books to you completely. Full transparency on this podcast about what's happening at Creatures of Habit. I want to start off by saying we are in such a great place, and we are, you know, we, as of last week, I think, or last month, you heard that we had closed our round of funding, and the two of us are now back in innovation mode, proactivity mode. We're not on our heels. We're on our toes. We're walking into the ring. We're sort of like owning the center of the ring now, as opposed to sort of skirting around the perimeter. And yeah, we're in a really, really strong place. It's awesome. I'm really fired up. Jonathan Yarmeisch, what you got, bro?
We're back. Yeah, we're in a good place. We're in a good place. And it is interesting because you kind of approach it from a different perspective. At least I do somewhat, but you know, knowing how you don't lose the perspective of how tight things have gotten, and knowing that you don't want to position yourself and repeat any, you know, past errors or lose any of those learnings, right? So like, now that we are in a much better place, you know, from a capital standpoint, and then also just our control over the P&L, which I don't know if we've like fully talked about this really, but being profitable in March was a huge accomplishment for us.
Let's go.
Yeah, huge, which is very drastic from where we were obviously 12 months ago, but even 6 months ago. And a lot of the changes that we talked about in the first podcast that we'd started doing together are coming to fruition now. And that doesn't mean that they'll stay, right? Like, we still have to make bets and try to scale more aggressively. And that will come with, you know, potentially burning a little cash at times, but also trying to figure out what levers we can pull to actually grow the business. So it's very exciting to see that. And it's also exciting, like, you know, when we were talking last night, seeing the growth for Q1 this year versus last year being like 27% higher on revenue. But we also finished the quarter feeling like, you know, for most of that quarter, we weren't in a good place cash-wise. So we were still treading. And even as of yesterday, we were like, yeah, it felt kind of like steady and flat, like not as aggressive growth as we would expect. And then you sit back and look year over year, and you're like, oh, you know, it is happening. So I'm very happy about where things currently sit, and excited, you know, as we talked about last time, at the opportunity to actually like put capital behind innovating in areas that we've had to neglect out of necessity.
Yeah, dude, it feels phenomenal. I really feel this, I believe, to be what business is. It gets really, really hard. It gets really scary. You are able to develop skills that help you through that fear, that give you the confidence and the ability to push even when it's like a very, very tough place. And if all goes well and you don't throw in the towel, you come out the other side and you've had so much, the learning experience of those dark darker times or tougher times is what business is. I believe that. I believe that is how great businesses grow. Is it gets, you start, you take a risk, it gets hard, it gets good for a few minutes, it gets hard again, it gets good for a few minutes. But the majority of, I think, building business, specifically from the ground up, is you spend far more time in the mud than you do summiting, right? You just do.
I think when you speak about it, you almost take for granted the starting part, and even maybe before that, the ideation. So like, this is something I mentioned to you before we hopped on, but I was just listening to like Harley Finkelstein, the president of Shopify, at this like talk that he was doing, right? And during his talk, he mentioned a product that he recently purchased that was an electric kettle, so like for water, but like the overhead view looks like almost the DJ turntable, and he's into both of those things, right? And he said, you know, it's like, it's a great product, and like they'll do great, you know, they're going to do great this year. It's an awesome business model. And like I took that and I went and looked, because in my mind I was like, it's really not a great business model, right? It's a good product, and then there's going to have to be so much more that has to come with that. Like there needs to be something about the brand that has staying power, so that they can introduce more and have a community around it that is going to continue to further it to make it a great business. And that's the thing, I think, getting back to saying I think you take it for granted, is even with like the restaurants and for KOH, the things that were native to the ideation that you kind of naturally come across, I think is there's a brand and community feel around it, which makes it a good business. And then when you're operating the business, yes, you're kind of like in the mud throughout, but you forget, like, if the product sucked and the branding sucked, like there's no mud. You know, you just don't.
It's desert.
You don't have staying power.
Desert.
Yeah.
I said something. I remember I was having a lunch years ago with a guy named Mickey Drexler, who was part of the founding team or was the founder of Gap, and then ended up going over to J. Crew for a number of years. Just an icon in the apparel world, garment world. And he and I became friendly years ago because he loved the meatball shop, and then I introduced him to Seymour's. He loves Seymour's. I tried to get him to do an interview with me for years. He refuses. He has zero interest in media at all, period. Done, no interest. But we were talking, and I believe at my core that culture is everything. I really do. And I feel like brand doesn't exist without culture. A brand is a byproduct of the culture that you create. It just is, right? Like Parmesan cheese, man. Parmesan cheese comes from the culture of Italy. It's a brand. Parmesan cheese is a brand. It's delicious, it's tasty, but people know about Parmesan cheese because it's an Italian product that tastes good on everything. It's really a brand. It's part of a culture. It's bloomed from a culture of people, right? And so I said in that meeting, he was like, so, you know, he was asking me questions. He was like, so why do you think you've been successful, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, business without culture is dead. I believe that. He was like, what? He was like, say that again. I was like, business without culture is dead. And he was like, I've never heard anybody say that before. I'm going to take that with me. And that was like a massive compliment for me, because I'm like looking across at a guy who's just built massive global businesses. I think that is what we're doing at Kreatures of Habit. I put far more of an emphasis on the brand and the culture. And it's so hard when it's a digital brand and everybody is working remotely outside of you. Like even you though, we don't see each other every day. We talk multiple times a day.
Yeah, you just said outside of you. It's like I'm definitely remote.
Yeah, you're remote. So I think, you know, it's really, really hard to develop those things in a super meaningful, impactful way when everybody's remote. And I think a lot of businesses today, specifically in the digital landscape, do have those challenges, right? But regardless of the fact, it does come from the people. It comes from the people. And so we're building a brand, or we've built a brand, and it is deeply connected to culture. And as we continue to grow now, community is going to be a huge part of what we're trying to do. We're 2.5 years old. Well, actually, let's see. We're a little older than 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. But community is going to be a big piece. And I was speaking to Scott this morning, who is our digital content creator, who's actually sitting right there. We've got all three of us in a room here. The only person we're missing is Caroline. But bringing the community together in meaningful ways is something that I really want to start doing as a company. And we've got a bunch of cool things coming over the next 6 months, right? Okay. Like things that are certainly innovative and will ideally open up doors for us. So we're going to launch a new product in the fall, and that product is going to be a protein bar. I'm very excited about it. And the reason why I'm very excited about it is because I, as a fitness, wellness, nutrition maniac, don't have a protein bar that I go to on a regular basis. Like I will eat protein bars, but if you were to ask me right now, what is your go-to protein bar, I wouldn't really have an answer to tell you with full conviction. And so we're creating that. And I know it's a crowded space, and I know that, everybody's just like, oh God, good luck.
Protein bars is almost like Amazon. Like, you talk to one person about it, and it's super polarizing, right? They're like, oh, such a crowded space, I would never go into bars. And then you go to someone else, and they're like, yeah, I don't have a protein bar right now that I like. Like, I'm in that camp as well with you. But, at the end of the day, I think, like, same thing as Meal One and Nightcap. Like, there's going to be other products in the space, but you have a good product, you have a good brand with community, you have staying power.
Last night when I stopped at the gas station when we were on the phone, I grabbed a protein bar. You probably heard me eating it on when I got back in the car. I was not happy eating it. Like, I knew that I was putting some garbage into my system. Like, I knew that, and like the thought that came to mind for me was like, I wish I had the damn Kreature bar right now.
Did you go in knowing what you were going to buy?
No. I just knew that I needed a snack, and I wanted protein.
What was did you have any evaluation process at the shelf, or like you saw a brand?
What's the lesser of all evils? That was sort of the way I looked at it, because I wasn't walking into like Erewhon or Whole Foods. I was walking into the gas station, and so everything on the shelf there is it's like slim pickings if you're trying to get something that nutritionally makes sense. For me at that moment, I was like, I want 20 grams of protein, or somewhere between 15 and 30 grams of protein. What do I do? And I just grabbed the one that I knew was going to taste good. At the end of the day, like, I would never have those bars sitting in my house or in my bag. And so for me, having the ability to be able to like tell the masses, hey, like, you can have 100 grams of protein in your bag all the time. That's going to be freaking good for you. It's going to taste really good at your disposal all the time. All you need to do is open it up and go. Like, you always have a bunch of protein bars in your bag. Like, for me, I'm not saying you should eat protein bars all day long, but I am saying that, like, protein should be your number one macronutrient focus in terms of what you put the priority on for your health, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people. And an easy way to get protein is through protein bars. However, the majority of them are not made with the most sort of nutritionally thought through ingredients.
Yeah.
We're going to make it.
And I think the challenge is obviously, like, at the end of the day, anyone making it is running a business. It is cheaper to make unhealthy products. So it is a better business model. I mean, I think that we've kind of, even from the get-go, you think about like the pricing conversations we had around Meal One, we're like, is it priced too high? And that was kind of before inflation became inflation, and the supermarkets are priced how they are now. We're like probably at the lower end, honestly. But we'd rather charge what is reasonable for a healthy product than kind of chase to the bottom with some of this other stuff that's on the shelves.
Yeah, and honestly, dude, I had no idea that we were going to talk about the protein bar on this podcast, but I do think that it's a smart thing to do, because we have a community of people that listen to this podcast. It's not a massive group of people. I mean, we're hoping to scale it and make it bigger and better, but there's about, I think, 4,000 people that listen every single week that subscribe. So if you have any friends, I'm looking at you at the camera on YouTube. I'm talking to you. If you have friends that you think would appreciate this podcast, please share. We need more subscribers. We want more subscribers. We want to build a community. The protein bar conversation is something I'm really, really passionate about, because very similar to Meal One, what inspired me to want to create the business was this idea that like I wanted, I was making this meal for years and years and years because I didn't trust the stuff that you can buy in the store. You know what I mean? Like, it just what I know for a fact, even just looking at the ingredient panel and the nutrition panel, I was like, I can't put that into my body every day. Like, every once in a while, all right, whatever. I'm gonna pinch, I'll do it. But like Meal One, I have this every single day. Every single day. I never ever question. I take it with me everywhere. This business is truly like me scratching the itch. So we created Nightcap, which is a sleep support powder without melatonin, because I prioritize sleep and I can't take melatonin, and almost every single sleep support has melatonin in it. So we created, it took us a year, Nightcap, which is a sleep support powder. It tastes just like hot chocolate. It's delicious. You could take it with you everywhere you go, and it does not have melatonin in it, and it's super effective. Now we're on to our third product, which in my mind is sort of just like a massive unlock for us.
Yeah. I would also say that it's important to understand that we're not focusing on a new product and disregarding the old product as well. Like right now, even as we're having this conversation, right, you also kind of teased out in your email this past week about us making some tweaks to Meal One to make it more enhanced. I think we've talked about that on the podcast already, of us taking trips out to the manufacturer to get that locked in. Like, that stuff's going to be rolling out soon, and it's going to make Meal One better. So just because there will be a new SKU in the mix, like, we're still making sure that all the products in the portfolio are intentional and continue to deliver value and evolve over time. And that's kind of like the conversation that we were having like just before we walked in here. Like, what I've been thinking about a lot lately is just, and I said to you, I think yesterday during the day, about like great brand and great product. Like with brand, continuing to think through some of those community elements like you and Scott were talking about. And then, product, we're obviously heavily focused on making Meal One better, getting Nightcap in more hands, and this third SKU, the protein bar, coming out. And then the third thing I think is availability. And that's the other piece that we have restricted intentionally to this point, so that we could really lock in on that we have all of our ducks in a row, so that when we enter different channels, if we choose to, that it's financially viable for the business and it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any like set plans for, Amazon or wholesale or retail currently, but we have a lot more flexibility in having those conversations because we've made some changes that afford us that flexibility.
Yeah, and something that I actually noticed on my drive down to city last night when you and I were talking is like the conversations that we're having now are just so much different than they were 4 months ago. The conversations that we're having now are like us building. It's all about building. And you and I we talk probably 3 to 5 times a day. Some of those conversations are 15 minutes. Some of those conversations are 2 hours. The conversations that we're having today are all about building the business, building the brand, being proactive, being on our feet. And you had mentioned a book that I'm listening to right now, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah. So I love, and I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if the proactivity conversation that you and I have all the time is on a byproduct of reading that book, mm-hmm. But he talks about that a lot in the book, where it's just like proactivity is how you get ahead. It is a prerequisite and a requirement for growth. It is truly the only way, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, right? Like, if you're not proactive as an employee of a company, or as a partner, or as a founder, or as a human, if you're not proactive, your chances of growth and success and happiness, because ultimately all the things that proactivity bring to the table will funnel into this happiness cup.
Yeah.
But if you're not proactive, it doesn't happen.
I'm glad you started. You're listening to it?
Yeah.
I'm glad you started. If you're listening to it with him too, it's a little boring. Like his voice is.
I kind of like his voice. He
soothing.
reminds me of. I listened to another book about this crazy dude down in Florida who was like a cocaine cowboy. They have like the same voice.
Well, yeah, that book. Like if I was like gifting a book to anyone, it would be that book. It's like it resonates for me just because of the way the framework is almost outlined, and that's just kind of how I think. But any book that I've read after that is about like mindset or kind of self-help oriented, for me it has like elements of what that book already outlines.
One other thing that I want to talk about before we close this month's episode is us building out our brand partner team. And when I say brand partner team, I mean people that we've identified as, and obviously the feeling has to be mutually aligned, right? But people that we've identified to represent the brand as partners of our company. And one of them that I'm really, really excited about is Marcus Philly. Marcus Philly is just a real voice in the fitness and nutrition world. He's got a massive audience of people that really do hang on to every word he says because he is incredibly knowledgeable. And we are starting to work with Marcus. And it's just such for me as a founder of a company, a guy, and I've followed him for years, to have a guy like him think Kreatures of Habit is like a place where he wants to hang his hat is just a massive, not only compliment to the brand, but it just affirms this idea that we're building something great. We've made our way into the ethos of people like that, like I do Marcus Philly's workout. If anybody doesn't know who Marcus Philly is, he's sort of the guy that coined functional bodybuilding. He was a highly intensive, competitive CrossFit Games athlete. And after he stopped competing in CrossFit, he kind of came to the conclusion that training like this all the time is not something that is sustainable. I love CrossFit. I love CrossFit, but I also love bodybuilding, and I also love conditioning work. And so he's created functional bodybuilding. Not only did he coin the term, but he has a business called Functional Bodybuilding, where he offers training programming, nutrition, coaching, and he puts out in just an unbelievable amount of content. Really great, super valuable, high-touch content. So I'm really, really excited about working with Marcus. And there's a couple of other people that we're in negotiations with that I'm also really excited about. And once those deals are done, I can't wait to introduce those people to the community of people that listen to this podcast, and obviously on social media, on our website, things like that. But I'm very excited about Marcus Philly, man. I think he and I have spent a lot of time talking, and we are so aligned in our way of thinking about fitness and life, and how those two things just sort of blend so harmoniously together. So, yeah, we've got a lot of cool things, man. One other thing maybe that we should talk about, but it's not set in stone, but fuck it, we'll talk about it because it is something that I'm excited about potentially doing. But there's going to be something called the Kreature Kamp that we're going to try to do at my property. And I'm putting it out into the world. So now that I've put it out into the world, kind of has to happen, right? Like, fuck it. Whether it happens when we're trying to do it or it happens a little bit later on will be to be determined. But Kreature Kamp is basically going to be a community event that we host at my property in upstate New York. It'll be our brand partner sort of athlete team. It'll be 5 people from our ambassador affiliate team, and then somewhere between 5 and 10 people from the Kreature community at large, subscribers that are passionate about it, about what we're doing. And we're going to fly everybody in, all expense paid, and we're going to camp on my property. There'll be tents set up there. We're going to do some deep dive self-dev work. We're going to do some breath work. It's not going to be one of these retreats where you just work out all the time and cook food. It's going to be like a real impactful, you're going to walk away from the event saying, my gosh, like, I can't wait to tell everybody I know about what we just did. So I'm working on that. I said it. It's got to happen. Now it's got to happen. Anyway, you got anything else for the community?
No, I think that those were the big updates. Again, excited for what's ahead. I'm glad what we were able to accomplish in the first quarter. But yeah, like we've said all along, it's like there's peaks and valleys, and like we're coming out of one of those valleys and, you know, trending upwards. So let's hope we can carry that momentum, or we will carry that momentum is a better way to say it.
The reframing.
Yeah.
The reframing. All right, y'all. Creatures of Habit, what's really happening is now come to a conclusion for this month. I really appreciate you guys. I really do. Like, sometimes I pinch myself and I'm like, man, is this thing real? Is this real? Like, I'm even when it's so hard, even when it's super hard, I feel like I get to live my best life in this brand with the community that we're creating, with people that I get to work with. I really do love what I do. And I can only wish that for you guys listening to this podcast. I promise you that it's possible. Do you have to take risks? Hell yeah. Is it super freaking hard? Hell yeah. Is it scary and you got to have people around you to support you in those times? Absolutely. Is it possible? 1,000 effing %. I promise. I promise. Share the podcast with friends and family. Give us a 5-star rating and a review. It would really mean the world. Subscribe to Meal One. Subscribe to Nightcap. And soon enough, you'll be able to subscribe to the Creature Bar, which will be dropping sometime soon. Anyway, y'all, I love you, and I appreciate you. Until the next one, peace.